everyone, welcome back to another video. Today we're working on the Suzuki Swift and we're replacing a shock absorber because this one has been leaking for a while. It has no absorption whatsoever, so it's rattling around in the back of the car and it makes the car feel very unsettled on anything that's not perfectly flat. So how to tell if your shock absorber needs replacing is that it will look like it's been leaking. You might even see a little oil patch on the floor if it is oil filled and not gas filled. But yeah, these are oil filled, they've been leaking. One shock absorber's drenched, the other one's bone dry. I did buy two shock absorbers because the one on the driver's side, the right hand side, actually failed first. But now this one, the passenger side, has failed, and it's best practice to replace them in pairs, but it's not always necessary. This one has failed literally a month after the first one was replaced, so that gives you a good example as to why it's best practice to replace them in pairs. But it's also most likely due to the mileage on this particular car why they've both failed pretty much at the same time. So let's jump into it and I'm going to show you how to replace them on a beam axle without even needing to jack up the car. So this is why you don't need to jack up the car when replacing shock absorber on the back of a beam axle. Normally the spring and the shock absorber will be completely separate, and the spring obviously holds the weight of the vehicle, whereas the shock absorber is just there to absorb the shock of the road and its undulations. So the spring will always keep the car up and perched, and we can unbolt the shock absorber at the bottom, unbolt it. Sometimes it's in the wheel arch, other times it's inside the boot. On this particular model it's inside the boot. It would be more difficult to not remove the wheel and not jack up the car if it was bolted to the inside of the wheel arch, but the top of the shocker in this one is in the boot, so that's where we're going to go first. Then we'll undo that, and that is it. It's literally a bolt at the top, or a nut at the top should I say, and a bolt on the bottom, and then it's off. So in this boot we've got a few clips dotted around. We're then going to pull this particular section of the carpet back, and somewhere around here is where we'll see the top of the shock absorber. And this is usually the case with any beam axle. The spring will help hold the vehicle up and the shock absorber will be easily accessible either inside the boot or, as I've mentioned, up under in the wheel arch, just there. So that's where you need to look on cars with beam axles on the rear. This is the nut at the top, hold this little cap on, and we should be able to drop it out of the bottom once we've undone it from the bottom. So I've got clamps on the top of the strut and I'm just using the spanner repeatedly to loosen this nut and get it up the strut threads. Fast forward a little, we can get the cap, the nut, and the top bush will come out as well, which sort of wedges it between the chassis. So the bottom of this is actually a nut. I thought it was a bolt, but it's a 17 just like the top, so we're going to get it with an impact gun this time. We've got a lot of access, we might as well make it a little bit easier for ourselves. And now the shock should slide off, and we'll be able to pull it out from the top. Right. As you may have seen, I was struggling just a little bit, but I've used this. This is a ball joint splitter, and it fit perfectly behind the shock absorber bottom mount there, and so I've just hammered the ball joint splitter in between the shock and the lower arm, or the trailing part of the beam there, and yeah, just whacked it off nice and easy. So that should pull off now. So we've got the old shock absorber off, and we need to get this collar, this mounting plate here, and we're going to reuse, although they are a bit broken, the cover for the shocker as well as the bump stop. Now I know that's detached, but I wasn't spending another 30-40 quid on bump stops and all these little bits when the car itself's worth about £600. So we're going to reuse these and make do, and at least the car will be safe and the spring and shock absorber will work as they are intended, and the shock absorber will actually absorb shock from the spring. Yeah, fucking power left in it.
Eventually.
So what I've done quite crudely is I've chopped the shock absorber. I've then put the vice grips where they were at the top, you know, to hold it, to get the nut off, but I've used it instead as a bit of a purchase. And then I've got a socket, a hammer. I've whacked this down on a hard surface to release the cap that we need, and also the this little shaft that we need as well to give the correct spacing for the bushes that wedge between the chassis inside the boot. So we can now reuse this shank, this shaft, we can reuse this cap, and we can reuse the dust cover as well, and the what's left of the bump stop, and throw them onto the new shock absorber. So now I'm going to build this back up as it came off, or as the old one came off. That went on first. Oh no, hold on, sorry. That will have gone on first, the dust boot. Would it? Maybe? Yes, it would. Need to take this off first, little washer. Then the dust boot will go on. Perfect. And then this can go on. And then this can go on. And then this can go on. That needs hammering on over the threads. I think I'm going to give that a quick clean first, and that should be good to go. So that's how it's going to go on the car. I know it's a little bit crude, I know it's not perfect, but it will be safe and usable, and we'll throw this back in the car now. So there we go, it's in situ. I compressed it and got it into position, and then yeah, let the top rise up to the wheel arch where it mounts to the chassis, and then slot the bottom on. It took me a couple of goes because it was trying to expand as I was trying to fit it, which made it a little bit awkward with the wheel in place, but yeah, it only took me a couple of goes. I've saved a lot of time keeping the wheel on. But yeah, we're going to get this nut on now, get the cap on the top, and then that will be it. So that's it for this particular video. That's how you replace a shock absorber on a beam style rear axle. If you found this useful, give us a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't done so already, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye for now.